Rudy is an obese, unattractive introvert who was forced by God to be nerfed and given erectile shortcomings. He is reincarnated in the body of a pervy infant in an unfamiliar world, where he is born with limitless magical ability.
You shall not pass!
If you're up to date, you'll know that Rudeus reached a peak in his life only for what he's built and nurtured for months to diminish in less than 24 hours. Joy came at night this time, and the sorrow that came in the morning was more than devastating. But yeah, he's in a bad place right now. He's moving up north in search of his mom. It's been 2 days, and his countenance has emerged as a concern to a fellow passenger on the carriage he's using. Suzanne finally can't take it anymore, so she reaches out to him asking why he's headed to the north.
This is Jon Snow.
Seeing that he's not an adventurer and is a kid, she was trying to be nice, but his response was cold. Suzanne's friend Sarah reacts to the way Rudeus, replied to Suzanne. This prompts Rudy to open up at least, telling them that he's searching for his mom. The north side is a big place. I wonder how he's planning on looking for his mom. Suzanne tells him about the north side. They're poor in that area, but they're 3 prominent towns. Sarah has the feisty spirit that Eris has. The world ain't even being lenient with him. They get to town. Ruby gets himself a room. He goes in and lays down on the bed whilst holding a piece of Eris hair. He motivates himself that he didn't come all the way here to sulk over Eris, but to find his mom. He gathers himself and goes to the guild. I know it's dull and dark, but it's only a matter of time before the mood brightens up. He disbands his group and requests for a job, but the receptionist won't allow him the job because he's alone. In the midst of talking with the receptionist, Suzanne walks up saying she overheard the conversation and offers him a spot in her group. She takes him to her table and convinces him to join them. Sarah doesn't even like the idea that Suzanne is reaching out to him. Rudeus finally agrees, and they all go and prep for the job the next day. Rudy arrives early before everyone. The rest of the band walks in together. Rudy introduces himself officially, and so does Suzanne, who stretches out her hand for a handshake. Rudy lifts his hand though, but stops halfways, then retracts his hand. They set out. They introduce themselves. Suzanne's band consists of 5 members. Suzanne, a sub-leader and frontline fighter. Timothy, who specializes in long-range attacks. Patrice, who also fights in the front line. Mimir, the healer. And lastly, Sarah, the mid-range archer. The foolish girl turns around and yaps about how she doesn't want him around, but she is just laying low because of Suzanne. They stop to camp because it's already dark. Information about the Luster Grizzlies that they're here to hunt. Its weakness is that they can't see well in the night. Suzanne goes over the battle strategy, placing Rudy as the backline fighter. He tries to talk his way into letting her change his position to back support, but everything he says, Sarah shoots down the idea with her revolver. I don't know what's got Sarah all worked up, but she should get her act together. The Grizzlies are in sight. The attack is commencing. Timothy and Ruby start the offensive using long-range attacks to cut down their numbers. The survivors of the first attack charge towards them. Rudy uses earth magic to turn the soil into mud, which traps the Grizzlies. Timothy does not hold back. He uses his fire magic on them continuously. But wait. What's that?
It's a bird!
It's a plane!
It's Superman!
Rudy notices something and puts his ears on the floor. Everyone is wondering what he's listening to. Suddenly, a herd of black grizzlies appear, charging at them. They all decide to make a run for it. I know it's depression, but the stupid boy stands there and does nothing. The grizzlies approach him, so close that one had already lifted up its arm through its 5 metal claws that look as sharp as Wolverine's. But Suzanne comes in and blocks it. She tells them that she'll bait them. They should make a run for it, but nothing for them. It's like a gang up, white grizzlies on one side and black grizzlies on the other.
You're racist.
The battle begins. I must say Sarah is good, seeing that she's not all spike but has good action too. That took me by surprise. The synergy here too is crazy. Like the healer not waiting 1 second to cast a healing spell immediately. Suzanne was hit across the field. Rudy just stood there, doing absolutely nothing, asking himself stupid questions. Everyone fights in a circle around him with him in the center. He finally gets an epiphany and moves up to be useful with his life. The remaining living grizzlies magically arrange themselves a distance away. Rudy walked ahead of everyone and told them to leave the rest to him. He creates a fireball as bright as the sun and dusts the earth clean of those beasts. One thing about this part though was that when Rudy moved up, He smiled. Is he ready to move on? The next day, they all skin the grizzlies. It's made of thick fur which would fetch more than enough cash in the market. That part is my thinking, though. They're probably roasting the grizzlies because I don't believe that they'll let all the meat go to waste. Suzanne thanks Rudy for saving them. Rudy is just glad that he came along. He finally smiles at her and stretched out his hand for a shake. They decided to return to the village. Sarah begrudgingly appreciated him for saving them. Immediately they step into the guild. The rest of the adventurers glare at them in jealousy as they troop in with the skin of the grizzlies all up on their shoulders, high enough for all these low lives to see. Timothy kisses ass by buying a round of drinks for everyone. He returned to his inn and, unlike the first time arrived, this time he put on the fireplace and sits in front of it. You know it's normal for guys to talk to their biceps and name them. But your knees? Who names their knees? He didn't even give complimentary names. Probably they're complimentary in Japan. He named the left knee Tindalos and the left Baskerville. He continues jugging, goes back in and works on his upper body. I should be like him, at least I should try. Before he leaves, he prays to his deity. If you don't know his deity, you must have seen him bold it and cry when he returned to the inn and sat in front of the fireplace. That's a wonderful piece of cloth from his master Roxy that he's had since he was a child. For personal reasons, I can't tell where the piece of cloth is from, but from the shape, you can't tell me that you don't know if you don't. That's on you. He makes his way to the guild, and as soon as he gets in, he meets a band who were floating about the job they were about to do, and they take their leave. He's gotten quite popular and has gotten a new nickname, Quagmire. Everyone knows his objective and will try to help him out. He picks up a job at the guild and head to get the job done. It's a simple job to pack snow. On his way back, he encountered Sarah. She asked if he's heading back to the inn. He's heading there, but first he has to report to the guild. She proceeded to invite him over to complete a job with them. He's indecisive at first, but as soon as Suzanne came around asking what his answer is, he agreed to tag along. They're to make the earth a better place by clearing out the Galgao ruins, which was built during the first Human-Demon War. He chit-chats with Sarah about the fact that he's amazed by the structures in the ruins. He has a demon eye that lets him see into the future. Like 2 or 3 seconds. He foresees that Sarah would fall, so he jumps in and hold her as she fell, but accidentally, you can't control where you squeeze. He grope at her beautiful melons in the process. She reacts. They're here to gather snowdrake scales that are in the dungeon, but it can't be that easy. The snowdrake creatures crawl out of the caves in the walls. They all fall back. The battle was fierce, but just as it felt like the snowdrakes had them cornered, the guy from a while ago, who was gloating about the job he was gonna do, makes a dramatic entrance like Superman with a katana. In a matter of minutes and combined efforts, they make waste of the snowdrakes. Timothy steps up to greet the leader of the other group, but Timothy was punched by that gloating bastard. He thinks they were stealing his job, but later was explained to be a big misunderstanding. Apparently, the gloating bastard was sent to kill the snowdrakes in Ilbron Cave, which was a day's journey from there. But apparently the Gugao Cave and the Ilbron Cave are linked by tunnels in the wall which lead them here. They all return to the guild to celebrate. Everyone drinking and getting drunk except from Rudy. Jokes are made. People are teased. Nothing much to see here until the gloating bastard came in drunk and apologized for his behavior in the cave. He teases Timothy for always smiling and passive, and as soon as he gets on Rudy's case, all hell breaks loose. It annoys him to the core that Rudy is always smiling and looking down. He never looks at people in the face. His eyes are like he's been through a lot, like no one has had it worse than him. It gets even better, as Rudy does not react. He feels Rudy is making fun of him and grabs Rudy by the collar and raises him up. I know he's drunk, but that's just a little messed up. Rudy sits alone at a table. The gloating bastard walks in and sighs like he's got no cares in the world, as if something didn't just happen a while ago. He asks Rudy what he's still doing in the guild. He's waiting for scraps. The name of the gloating bastard is Soldat Heckler. Soon after Susanne and half her group stroll in, Rudy goes over to ask where they've been and where the rest are. Susanne replies that they're dead. I know he's going through some things, but his reaction to hearing about their deaths was just cold. Timothy lightens the situation by saying Mimir is dead, but Sarah got separated from them. They tried to reconnect with her, but could not because of the blizzard, and they were attacked by mountain buffaloes. Rudy just carefully steps out without leaving a clue that he's going to look for her. He goes to his inn and prepare his bag and heads out. He gets to the blizzard and blows it away. He treads into the forest and sees the buffaloes. He lays waste to all of them, mercilessly holding back on none. He sees a pile of bones, he goes through them and notices Sarah's earring in the pile. He lowers his head for just 1 second, and a living tree sends an iceberg his direction. Rudy manages to avoid the hit. He sees Sarah trapped in the tree and heads there. The tree tries to use vines to trap him too, but he burns through them and grabs Sarah along with him. They escape into the river nearby. They stay in a cave to dry off after a while. They put on their clothes and leave. They arrive at the entrance of the town and incidentally meet the rest of the gang there, and for the first time we see Sarah defend Rudy as Suzanne shouted at him for leaving to find Sarah under the blizzard. He saved Sarah, but it feels like he's the one that was saved. Everyone's having a good time at the bar. Rudy has been going on jobs with them more frequently. He's also gotten really close to Sarah. Sarah fills him in on her childhood. Her father was a hunter, and that's why she uses her bow for adventures. Rudy, we all know his, so I'm skipping it. Sarah whips out a knife and said she needs to get it sharpened. She asked if he's free to go out with him to the swordsmith the next day. He agrees. Little do they know they're flirting in public. It's only afterwards that Rudy realized that he's been asked on a date. Sarah arrives for the date with a very nice dress. Rudy doesn't fail to amaze me. He wears his normal clothes. At dusk, they find themselves at a bar. She loved the date, of course. She rests her head on his shoulders. Rudy is conflicted whether to go with the flow or act innocent. The heartbreak of Eris, plus the heartbreak of this rejection, it would be phenomenal. So he's treading on this ground carefully. He tries to dismiss her for the night, but she said she still wants to talk. She pulls out her big guns and asks him to take her to his place. They get to his inn, and before he puts the light on, she has already shown herself to the bed and taken off her jacket. He offers her a drink, but boy oh boy, all she was interested in was the rod of Moses. She calls him to the bed and tells him how grateful she is that he came to save her that day. So, go ahead. I actually expected him to lag a little, but no. Bro throws her back on the bed. These are the kind of clothes I love. In one hand, fling. The gown was already off. She too came prepared. Why will we plan to do the deed and you'll come wearing layers upon layers upon layers of clothes? He takes off his shirt. No much for play needed here. He going straight to the business. Today, his body lets him down as the rod of Moses. His rod had decided not to rise and split the ocean. Sarah gets up and leaves in embarrassment. Rudy goes to the bar and looks for solace at the bottom of every bottle and every cup that can intoxicate him. Soldat walked in and approached Rudy, asking if he's had a bad day. Rudy gets up and sucker punched him. He used this opportunity to vent out all his anger into Soldat. With every punch, a full force of emotion was dealt. Soldat tells him to get up and drink some more, but this time, Rudy should pour his heart into Soldat. He fills Soldat in on everything that's going on. He was dumped because he couldn't get it up. Soldat dogs in deeper. Rudy then tells him about Eris and what happened with Eris. Rudy sulks about Eris leaving him, saying things I remember one of my bros saying when they broke his heart. Isn't the rod of Moses in my possession big enough? Am I just that big enough? Soldat tells him he's got a plan. They head to a brothel and he tries all sorts of things with a mistress, but nothing happened. Still no response. The rod has decided to split no seas. Since nothing can be done, they decide to drink themselves till they pass out.
Now, Master Rudy.
Dawn breaks, and the bartender told them, it's about time they close. They head out. Soldat uses that opportunity to explain to Rudy that some things cannot be rushed. He'll take them slow and steady. They get to a point where Rudy runs his mouth out loud and says ill things about the date he had with Sarah. He trashed it, craps all over it. But unknowing to him, Sarah was behind him, listening on everything he was saying. When he realized she was there, she walked up and threw the knife they got together that night on the floor. Suzanne comments that what he said was just low. Suzanne and Sarah take their leave. Rudy falls to his knees because even he knows that at this point, he has messed up real bad. Soldat offered for Rudy to tag along to check a cave that just came up. What are bros for? Rudy accepted. Rudy builds a stone tower to scout after the guys leave on the expedition. He promptly warns the others that a troop of luster grizzlies is approaching from the front. The men belt themselves, draw their swords, and fight. But it was soon realized that the monsters were fleeing the red dragon. Boom! The dragon kills him and taunts people. The dragon kills them one by one, preventing retreat. Rudy, Quagmire, distracts the men while he attacks. His opponent is the dragon. Rudy dodges the dragon's fire and kills it by dropping sharp stones on its head. The men return to base and thank Quagmire, who appears bashful about defeating the dragon that so many men couldn't. The next day, Rudy does his usual early morning workout and then goes for a meal. He overhears some men telling the story of how he slayed the beast when a badass-looking lady walks into the bar. From her eyes, you can tell she wants to swallow Rudy whole. Rudy also notes her odd behavior around him and asks whether she likes him. A strange-looking elderly woman with elven ears introduces herself as Elena Lee's Dragon Road. Seriously, folks, what kind of name is this? She informs him she was in his father's party and is Roxy's buddy. Rudy's eyes and ears lit up when he heard Roxy's name, as he heard the One Piece treasure location. Despite his boasts about being a virgin, Elena Lise kisses our boy and makes seductive advances. The stupid moron awaits the unrequited kiss. Elena Lise takes his jewelry and shows him her identical one. Elanaise said Rudy Zenith is in Rapan, a labyrinth near the Begarit continent's heart. I don't know where that area is, but Rudy says it will take him a year to get there, and it's winter. Rudius returns from his morning training to find something that crushes my brain into 47 pieces. So here it is. You know Elena Lise has a problem. As long as his rod and staff worked, Elena Lise would sleep with any man. She was doing that when Rudeus observed her through this window. This woman did it. Once Rudius noticed her and advised her to close her window to avoid catching a cold, the town's men gathered to witness the free OnlyFans display. Rudeus says he wants to get into her velvety wetness but can't. His rod is more rope than rod. He admitted he had significant erectile dysfunction. He discovers Elena Lise slept with one of his Red Dragon mission partners the next day while out. The guy apologizes to Rudy, thinking Elena Lise was his baby, and understanding his power wouldn't like him to injure him, but Rudeus says this woman is free for all. Elena Lise gives Rudy a letter from Genius, the vice principal of Roxy's alma mater Renoa University of Magic, after this strange episode. Rudy works out again. Our son was invited to the famous university due to his amazing ability. Rudius Quagmire contacts Conrad, who attended the university but quit out in his 5th year. Not my mother's ideal son. He encourages Rudy to accept because he may learn a lot from them. Rudeus has the strangest dream that night, where he meets God and complains about his erectile dysfunction. Our Father in Heaven tells him to enroll at the university and investigate mass teleportation in Fitoa to regain his manliness and pride. Rudy wakes up with our naked adult movie actress near him, but Rudeus doesn't budge. Lord, I never thought I would say this, but thank you for letting me wake up without trying every morning. Rudy and Elena Lise then visit the mystical learning citadel. Finally, inside the school gates, Rudy tells Elena, the active female he's been traveling with, that he wants to see a genius person. Elena stated she now likes men his age and wants to attend the school to fraternize. On his way to school with her, Rudy noticed she bangs new men every night. I think bro would have died if Rudy wasn't faulty. They head directly into Genius's office, exchange greetings, and Genius, a school teacher, is shocked Rudy came so soon. Rudy says he was suggested to come here. The teacher asks him why he came here. He says he just wanted to investigate, but you, me, and he know he came to research his dysfunction. On the hallway outside the office, Rudy admires the school's size and wonders if they have so many kids. Genius tells them it's not simply a magical school. They also teach medicine and other subjects. Rudy expressed interest in medical classes. Genius speculates that Rudy had someone with an illness. Side-eyeing Rudy, he came to inspect. Rudy lies through his teeth and approves. Before leaving Genius's office, he told Rudy he wanted him to take a quick test before enrolling in the school. At the test, Rudy will compete in a silent casting duel with another schoolmate. Silent Fitz appears when the camera turns around. Bro is so silent they had to add silent to his name. What is that cape? It's amazing. If Bro would wear a black dress, he'd be the Batman of the elf tribe. Can someone help me? Are those hues available? Rudy enters the combat with an advantage, as his discerning eye saw the future and wondered whether he saw that wand. He extends his wand and disrupts Fitz's power. Then Bro quickly fires pebbles at him, causing him to collapse. Rudy applies healing magic because Fitz has a little gash on his face. Would Rudy be overrated? Everyone is startled by what they saw, or is he just trained and experienced? Because someone is using his insect-infected dentition to say Rudy is overrated. Rudy helped Fitz up and whispered that he went easy because he's new. He promised to return the favor. Rudy is a part-time student on college. Rudy provides Elena fashion advice when she visits in school uniforms that are longer than usual. I call her Elena since Elena Lise is too long. The student president, who is fine to the moon and appears tastier than wine, has a bodyguard, a duke, and silence Fitz in a freshman diner. The president's address inspires everyone. Rudy glances past her, sees Fitz, and recalls to repay him. Rudy greets his class but gets no response. Shock! Do you remember when Rudy got an apprentice who was a prince? He got hold of one of Rudy's Roxy sculptures and has been looking for the sculptor. Immediately he found out it was Rudy. He pledged to be his apprentice, but he's a cursed child. The bro is so physically strong he could break your bones in an innocent hug. So much strength but little control. Floating like Rudy was paper. Gaia's, the chief of beings with animal ears, tails, fangs, and claws, produced the daughter. Linnea is the class tyrant, and Persena introduces herself with attitude. I don't intend to call them bitches, but they're dogs. How else would they act? This genius, Glyph, is just in his second year but has learned advanced magic of all elements, including healing, detoxification, and more. Cliff tells Rudy that Eris told him he was a swordsman and magician. He was intrigued by that name and asked whether she was at school, but bless the Lord she wasn't. Rudy tours the school and enters the Woe. That's a large library. You might not see a book again for 4 years. A library so large you could take 2 lefts and never leave. After choosing books, he meets Fitz, who's reading too. Me and libraries were 5 and 6 during my last year thesis project. Rudy is looking for a friend and researching metro transit. Fitz said he was looking for a companion but had to depart. Rudy and Zenoba have lunch and decide to take sculpture classes. Remember the Duke who walks with Ariel? He came around and introduced himself as a gray rat, calling Rudy forgetful. Rudy loses track of time in the library and is accused of stealing the president's pants upon returning to his dorm. A Monkey Kong-looking girl jumps down from her room and tries to drag him to the authorities, but Fitz saves him by saying he let the pants fall while hanging them. Side note, Fitz can remain at the girls' hostel because he guards the princess. Rudy describes his school day, and I swear school life everywhere, even in anime, stinks. He begins his day with basic training and then magical training. After breakfast with Zenoba, Rudy likes foreign food. As magnificent as she is, Elinalise still wants to make every man she meets come to their senses. Or do they? Rudy tells us he attends basic classes in healing, divine, and barrier magic in the afternoon, and investigates what the Lord Almighty ordered him to explore to become the man he was destined to be. His progress has been slow because teleportation magic is prohibited and little is known about it. Fitz approaches Rudy at the library and invites him to sit. As you might expect, these two are having a strange chemical interaction that I can't understand. Fitz arrives with a teleportation book and surprises Rudeus by asking if he may help with the investigation. The crazy idiot agrees. After a day of exploring, they return home. Rudy asks Fitz why he always wears sunglasses and which dorm he lives in on the way. Rudy is forbidden to answer the glasses question, and Mr. Fitz informs him he sleeps in the girls' dormitory because he defends Princess Ariel. Rudy is concerned because boys aren't permitted in the girls' dorm, but Fitz assures him that he won't hurt the princess. Rudy also asks Mr. Fitz if he has always been able to do spells without incantations or chants, and he says his master trained him. Rudy says he wants to meet his master, and these two stupid guys share another mushy moment before parting ways. I hate giving terrible news, but our main character freaking tells us that his heart beats faster when he sees Mr. Fitz smile. What the heck am I watching? I pray God grants me survival in this anime. After returning to his dorm, Zenoba attacks him and begs him to teach him figure sculpting. Here I go insane. Zenoba is an S-class pervert. I never encountered someone with a boner from mounded clay. Rudy reconsidered teaching him, but he promised. Rudius also says he helped himself to a few figures in his prior life. Oh my god, what kind of anime? Rudius claims he didn't start erotic sculpting classes because he didn't come to this school for it. We know he came to fix his manhood. Still, Rudy senses Zenoba's need and teaches him. But after multiple trials, they conclude that he is a naive idiot who can only applaud molded ladies. Damn. Does this anime have an unethical sexual spirit in everyone? His second attempt is to educate Zenoba to sculpt without magic. Hands-on sculpting, but the moron fails too. Rudy hits a wall with Zenoba. So the next day he asks Fitz for advice since Fitz is knowledgeable about bizarre things like this and gave him the idea to buy a slave. Once upon a time, people bought slaves to perform things they couldn't do themselves, like mold a sculpture for twisted reasons. Rudy, me, Fitz, and foolish Zenoba thought this was a brilliant idea, so they went to buy a slave that day. They arrive and witness many naked slaves. Mr. Fitz feels nervous, but Rudy shows his experience. They leave the giant warrior slaves and find a child to train themselves since youngsters, especially magically gifted ones, learn faster. They found this 6-year-old dwarf girl slave after some searching. Rudy found a method to communicate with her despite her English-speaking difficulties. He finally talks to the girl, who says she wants to live. Rudy and Zenoba are moved and promise to help. After eating, they contemplate naming the girl. Rudy asks for her name, and she quotes a long, strange, ludicrous name that sounds more like a Bible verse. I told you Zenoba was stupid, but he proved it by suggesting they call the girl Julius. Let's laugh together. Would you name your daughter Julius? Mr. Fitz suggests naming her Juliet, which is much better than Julius, and she liked it. Juliet moved in with Zenoba and learned earth magic from Rudy to construct twisted sculptures. We see Mr. Fitz talk about how his day usually goes about. He starts off with a little jogging and then proceeds to class, where he tells us how he has learned so much from Rudy. It's at this point that I begin to think there is something we actually do not know, and my biggest guess would be that somehow Mr. Fitz and Rudy have probably met before now. The chemistry is just crazy. We later see Mr. Fitz head out with the princess and this other guard, Luke. They talk about how the city is built like a maze while taking a shortcut to their destination. Later that night, we see Mr. Fitz unable to sleep because the only thing on his mind is Rudy. And suddenly, we see this bumbling idiot blush in the weirdest way possible. Let's move on to things that are a little less, weird. Rudy has already started his magic classes with Juliet, and she seems to be picking up pretty quickly because in just 1 month she is already capable of silently casting the rock spell. I don't know about you guys, but all these effort just to make a sexual mannequin for this weirdo seems a bit too much for me. Rudy tells us that he thought figurines were all Zenoba cared about, but somehow this dude was managing to take proper care of this girl, and all things seem to be progressing quite normally until the day Rudy asked Zenoba to show him the Roxy figure, and boy oh boy, Zenoba started sweating profusely, and he tried to say something, but Rudy quickly interjected, telling him he was lying. Zenoba brought out the figurine, and this thing was shattered, but that wasn't the only thing that was shattered. Rudy's heart was broken into 7 million pieces. Bro's eyes turned red, and don't ask me how I know, but Zenoba was 3 seconds away from meeting the eternal statue of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Luckily for him, the idiot was quick enough to tell Rudy it was Linnea and Persena who were responsible for this atrocity. Rudius Quagmire was furious and decided to give those girls a piece of his mind. That's when we see him and Zenoba in his very awkward and disturbing pose. At first, the conversation with the girls started pretty slow, but things got heated up quickly, and Rudy managed to rile one of the girls who lunged at him. All it took was a smack on the face to send the cat girl to the floor, and Rudy literally stepped on her bosoms. All the power in the world, and Bro still got the mind of a 6-year-old. He also made quick work of the second girl, and soon they were both tied up and ready for questioning. It has quickly come to my notice that Rudy is a menace to society. Rudius grabs a melon of this one to check if maybe his erectile problem has just magically disappeared. He begins to narrate to the girls how it was a statue of his god they just destroyed, and he proceeds to threaten them. The girls, who I thought were badass before, melted like soaked sponge. Remember I said Rudy was an idiot. Yeah, he proves it again, because suddenly he remembers he can actually just fix the figure, and everyone can have peace. Truly, this whole incident was unnecessary. Rudy ended up reporting them to Fitz, who came to see them, and I must say, these two pussies are more annoying than my baby sister. They managed to frustrate Fitz before Rudy puts them in their place. Again, Rudy ends up releasing them after they showed a bit of remorse, and afterwards Rudy and Mr. Fitz spend the rest of the day together, and Fitz teases Rudy about seeing her whole face. Our class genius is irritated by the classroom fighting and doesn't hold back. Rudy observes 6 classmates bullying the class genius later in the day while wandering around campus. Rudy rushes over and they depart. Cliff, the genius who doesn't like Rudy, thanks him instead of snapping at him. However, that was only the start of the magical lunacy. Cliff approaches Rudy later in class to talk. This hot moron pulls Rudy outdoors and tells him he likes Alinalise when Rudy wonders who she is. Rudy was astonished, but I was more so. Cliff urges Rudy to introduce him to her, which confuses Rudy because Alinalise is a sexual psychopath. Rudy asks Mr. Fitz for advice again and gets it. Mr. Fitz wonders if Rudy was hiding a crush. Contrary to his better judgment, Rudy introduced Cliff to Alinalise, and Cliff quickly expressed his desire to date her. She thinks Rudy is playing with her emotions, but he swiftly informs her he didn't, and Cliff was just a big idiot. Rudy finds Alinalise and Cliff soggy the next morning. From my perspective, they were playing love. Rudy is shocked to learn they are dating. Please wait, return the flip, no joke. These guys were in love and kissed madly. While everyone practices, they stay stupidly in love. This strange man challenges Rudy to a marriage fight shortly after this sad love story. Rudy then tells him he's not gay. He desires Persena, one of the 2 girls who broke his figure. Rudius is now pack leader. He must accept all duels. Odd, right? Rudius ends this combat swiftly before it gets messy. Things were messier than my toilet the morning after Thanksgiving, psych. Waiting for Rudy outside were countless men who wanted to marry Persena or Linnea. I thought this was too odd. Rudy was ready to defeat them all, but when he turned to confront the guys, he found that the Demon King Badigadi, a giant purple man, had already defeated them and challenged Rudy to a duel. I wondered how many men wanted to marry them. I was incorrect again. He came because he heard of Rudeus and wanted to see his strength. Rudy asks the Demon King whether he knows the man god, assuming he knows a lot. Badigadi pretends to know something and tells Rudy he doesn't. What strange creature is this? He then laughs strangely and begs Rudy to join him. Rudy does. While they talked, they were waiting for Fitz to bring Rudy's staff, which he did, so this duel should start shortly. Rudy, ever the coward, begs for his life even if he loses the duel, but Badigadi has other ideas. He asked Rudy to hit him with his strongest blow and win if he wounds him. Rudy swiftly formed this spinning thing and launched it at the person at high speed. Boom! He flew away, and I laughed my ass off when I saw that the blow hurt him and made him shrink as bits of his body crawled back to him. He knew Rudy won, but he wouldn't let it go. Rudy received a great blow that gave him a lump as big as my ex's chest. It wasn't like she was particularly gifted. Rudy gets a wonderful massage from Mr. Fitz to shrink the bump. Next day, Linnea and Persena applaud Rudy for his bravery and inform him he can feel Linnea's melons as his prize. My mind is blown by what follows. Class features the Demon King. Fitz watches Rudy playing with a female as they pass the corridor and wonders if he likes her. When they enter the princess's space, the prince asks Fitz about Rudy and whether she's informed him who she is. Fitz blushes profusely before informing the princess she can't do that. Rudy still has teleportation issues, so he asks Fitz in the library if he knows someone who can summon. Fitz suggests Silent 7-Star, a special student. Why do these weirdos start their names with Silent? Rudy decides to visit her, and when he enters, he finds a girl in a white mask and is terrified. He runs away and passes out, making her look familiar. A pair of soft hands touch his head, and he wakes up to find Fitz. He tells her about the white-masked woman who almost murdered him and raises his head to greet her. I think you can predict his reaction. Rudy asks about someone, and the mask-wearing woman says they're no longer after him. Fitz is upset and asks the lady how she knows Rudy, who denies it. Enough of it. The woman asks Rudy whether he remembers 2 names and which is his. He tells her he's neither of them and doesn't recognize the names, but he speaks the language. The lady was certain that Rudy and she were related by this. Rudy recognizes the girl from his past when she removes her mask. She's excited and tells Rudy they should work together to return to their planet. But Rudy surprises her by saying he doesn't want to. She wants to stay. We discover she was transferred here and Rudy was reincarnated. They then share their lives so far. She was traveling with the dragon god who had many adversaries, so they were either attacking or under attack. She gives him more intriguing information. That she's been here for 5 years but hasn't aged, maybe another difference between teleportations and reincarnations. She told him she had no mana, unlike Rudy who is exploding with it. They spoke more, and Rudy probably relaxed with her. She tells Rudy they should strike a deal because she has no mana and can't fight, but she doesn't like this world and wants to go home. Rudy is powerful and wants to stay, even if he can't lift his sexual equipment. She offers him information if he assists her with her experiments. He agrees. They realized they were speaking human language from their planet, which made Fitz uneasy, so they switched back to this world's language and started talking about things Fitz could understand. Mask Girl recounted that she arrived 5 years ago during the mass teleportation, so she probably started it. Fitz explodes at this revelation, remembering all mass teleportation caused. Rudy had to restrain him and explain that she was also a victim. After hearing this, Fitz calmed down and became sober. Rudy calls it a day and they leave. Fitz questions Rudy about 7-Star as they walk to their rooms, and he advises him to trust her for now. After hearing this, Fitz relaxes and they head to their dorms. The fact that Cliff and Alina Lees were together drove everyone insane. The princess asks Fitz if Rudy is single, which makes Fitz think, I think we can all agree that Mr. Fitz is a woman. Fitz worries about Rudy's 7-Star ties. Rudy trains in the morning, but the Demon King was there, making it uncomfortable. Baldigatti asks Rudy why he wants strength when life has greater things. Like what? Rudy asks. Like women? The Demon King says yes. Rudy elegantly asks the Demon King whether he can cure impotence, But he gets a heartbreaking no. Rudeus is now feared after beating everyone and almost killing the Demon King. Cliff and Rudy chat in class about Alinalise's curse, then go to lunch, where the Demon King ambushes them and sits at their table, making them uncomfortable. Rudy meets Seven Star after lunch to undertake summoning tests. She wanted to summon someone from their realm, and Rudy thought you could also send someone back. Rudy wanted additional summoning magic information, but she wasn't willing to share it until they made significant progress with their tests. However, Juliet is doing well in her magic classes and has a lot of potential. Rudy was still living regularly and hadn't found a remedy. Rudy receives a letter from an old colleague who wants to grab dinner with him while in town. Rudy ran to see him after hearing this news. Remember the guy Alinalise smashed without decency? He's surprised to learn that she has a man now. How could a first-class harlot like her have a man? Alinalise says Cliff won her heart, but did he? I no longer understand what's occurring. Rudy was worried since he hadn't seen Mr. Fitz in a while, and today as he passed the market, he saw him with the princess's second guard and went to greet them. But something was amiss. Fitz seemed to be ignoring him, which was odd. Rudy kept asking what was wrong, but Fitz didn't say anything. Hurt, he left wondering what happened. He was extremely upset that none of his guys were accessible to chat to. Zenoba was gone. Linnea and Persena were busy, even now. The Demon King hid his terrible face. Rudy reads a book. He enters the library and encounters Fitz, who is being his regular self. Fitz says he can't communicate on guard duty because he's silent Fitz, which makes sense, but Rudy thinks he's hiding more. Rudy realizes that whatever Fitz does affects him. Does he adore a guy? No, that would be disastrous. So he goes to the vice principal and asks for Fitz's sex, and is upset to learn that Fitz is a man. This was getting even more confusing, and Rudy couldn't even get an erection, so all his dirty thoughts stayed dirty and couldn't be processed into something more pleasurable. Seeing Mr. Fitz makes him blush disgustingly, so he runs to the library to calm down. Fitz catches him off guard. Rudy falls, and they fall together. Rudy puts his hand on Fitz's waist and it hits him instantaneously. Fitz was female. There was more. The madness continued. It finally stood. Little dude woke up. Why am I thrilled for him? The next day, Luke stopped Rudy as he was heading to class to talk to him about Fitz. Rudy quickly made some small talk about not knowing Fitz's identity and also not wanting to oppose any of them, and after that runs away like a little princess. The princess summons Fitz and tells her that she's aware that Rudy knows she's a girl now, so why doesn't she just open up to him and tell him her true identity? The princess also refers to her as Sylphie, but even with all the encouragement given to her by the princess, Fitz is still a bit reluctant and isn't bold enough to do this. The princess pushes her further, and her and Luke try to help Sylphie win Rudy's heart, only if she knew that she was one with the ability to get little Rudy to stand up. The princess then asks Fitz to share some distinct memories she remembers of her and Rudy's childhood, and she did that. Then she also asks her to reconfirm what sort of relationship she would like to have with Rudy, and this girl says she would like to share a bed with him, and then proceeds to start this disgusting talk about putting it in many times. Indeed, I am tired of this anime. I can now see that everybody has one sexual mental illness or the other. The princess tells Fitz that if she isn't able to go through with everything she has said, then she would forbid her from ever speaking to Rudius Greyrat. She has no choice but to take this seriously. They come up with a plan, and during lunchtime, Fitz walks up to Rudy and requests to speak privately with him. Fitz cooks up this ridiculous story about how the princess set her up to fetch a very rare flower that grows only in the Forest of Hail. After much bickering and unnecessary lying, Rudy agrees to go with her to fetch the flower. I call the lies unnecessary because Rudy would even give up his manhood that couldn't stand straight to be with Fitz. Together they set off into the forest, and soon the drama began. First they had to walk through this very high wall of snow, and then Fitz asked Rudy to give her his staff, and she used it to make rain clouds, and eventually rain, so her and Rudeus had to take shelter in a nearby cave. They had already been drenched by the rain, so after Rudy covered the entrance of the cave with another rock, he took off his clothes and made a fire to dry them. He turned and noticed that Fitz was still wearing her wet clothes, so he offered to turn around just so she could take off her clothes. But this Fitz is a wicked woman. She held Rudy with her wet hands and told him to undress her by himself, saying she couldn't do it herself. Reluctantly and slowly, Rudy started taking off Fitz's clothes one by one, and when he finally took off her glasses, he asked, "Is your name Sylphiette by any chance?" There you have it. He remembered exactly who she was, and she broke down crying. This was so touching as she begged him never to leave her again. Fitz had finally confessed love to Rudy, and I could swear that little Rudy was more upright than the long hand of the clock when the time hits 12 o'clock. Rudy realized more than ever that if he didn't tell Fitz how he felt, he could lose everything. He told her he loves her and kissed her beautifully. I suppose PG-21 guys were about to do X-rated stuff. I was very excited when Rudy asked Fitz if this was her first time, and she said yes just before they did the deed. Erectile dysfunction returned to Rudy. If this was me, I couldn't look at her face. Clear score. Man God 1, Rudius Quagmire 0. Rudy mustered up the nerve to apologize to Fitz for embarrassing her. I know her name is Sylphie, but Fitz still slaps, so, after the awkward apology, they decide to catch up on a date-like activity while holding hands and being mushy. Why do male protagonists always get flat-chested girls? I have nothing against them, but why? Recent couple returns to town and splits up. Fitz then reports to the princess's office on what happened before and after she played Rudy's part. The princess laughed, thinking she may have overestimated Rudeus. It pained Luke, who we believe didn't like Rudy, to defend him and claim it wasn't his fault. Or maybe Luke had the same issue. Stop assuming for now. Luke leaves the room after promising to aid Fitz. Fitz receives Rudy turning advice from the princess after apologizing for interrupting. Luke rushes in and declares that Fitz lacks the strength to pull it off. His delivery may have been awkward, but I agree with him. Grey rat guys like ladies with huge bosoms, he says. Seriously, Luke is mean. But then he offers something useful. He informs Fitz that this is an aphrodisiac and will make any man lose control, but it will help. Fitz is thrilled and immediately puts on new panties and runs to Rudy's dorm to get her cherry popped. He opens when she knocks and she says she wants to stay the night. I wish this generation's women were more like Sylphie. They drink, dine, and catch up when Fitz gives Rudy the aphrodisiac, stating it'll help. Rudy gulps and they wait for it to work. Fitz takes one swallow and warns Rudy not to hold back once it kicks in since everything was weird and uncomfortable. Aphrodisiac kicked in and Rudy and Sylphie performed the act before you could say kick in. Rudy wakes up the next morning to find Sylphie gone. But guess what's on the bed? Blood first. It was great. Rudy was a guy, Sylphie a woman, and I'm unmarried. He assumes Fitz left in the middle of the night, but Fitz walks up and thanks him for the great experience. Gosh, Fitz isn't my type, but I want her. Rudy praises her for fixing him and gives her the most lovely embrace ever. He visits the princess to thank her and promise to help her in any manner he can. After his healing, the princess asks him what he will do. She wonders whether he'll abandon Sylphie like that, and Rudy says he wants to marry her. The princess is pleased and promises to help Rudy and their marriage succeed. These guys blow my mind. Despite its quirkiness, this anime offers one of the nicest endings I've seen. We see Fitz discard the stylish glasses, and I wish them a great marriage and even happier sex life now that Rudy is man enough to dig in. My Riz demons, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and check out one of these 2 other videos. Also, if you want to get that shredded anime physique, click the link in the description below.